An asteroid called Borealis 719 is racing directly toward Earth. In desperation, the nations of the world join forces and launch countless rockets to destroy it. The asteroid is shattered, but the chemical substances released from it rain down across the planet, causing animals to mutate into enormous and extremely aggressive monsters. Within only 1 year, 95% of humanity has disappeared, forcing the remaining survivors to hide inside bunkers, caves, and fortified panic rooms. 7 years later, Evan still lives inside one of these bunkers, where he is the only person without a romantic partner, meaning he constantly has to listen to everyone else enjoying themselves nearby. Since Evan isn't particularly skilled at fighting monsters, he rarely ventures outside for supplies. Instead, he contributes by preparing meals and handling various physical tasks, including milking their cow. He also keeps a diary where he records everything he knows and sketches the different monsters he has encountered, hoping the drawings can become a survival guide for others. The group ran out of ammunition years ago, so they now depend on weapons such as bows and crossbows. One day, while Evan is practicing with a crossbow, the bunker's electricity suddenly shuts down. The survivors soon realize that several monsters have somehow breached their security system. A few of the men enter the underground tunnels to confront the creatures while everyone else watches their movements through the sensor screens. When it becomes obvious that the fighters are struggling, Evan grabs his crossbow and heads out to help. As he moves through the bunker complex, he suddenly comes across a monster. The creature has just finished tearing apart one of Evan's friends and immediately turns its attention toward him. Evan freezes completely, unable to move as the monster approaches. It is seconds away from killing him when his friends arrive and manage to bring the creature down. A flashback then takes Evan back to the time before the apocalypse, when he was with his girlfriend, Lena. After Evan draws a silly portrait of her, the two begin kissing, but their romantic moment is interrupted by an emergency alarm warning everyone that fragments from the asteroid and the rockets are falling toward Earth. Evan and Lena have no choice but to rush back to their respective families. In the present, Evan uses a radio to communicate with people living in other bunkers. He regularly stays in contact with Lena, and on this particular day he tells her about all the letters he has written for her over the years. Unfortunately, their communication suddenly cuts out when Evan's radio stops working. The broken connection brings back another memory of the past, when Evan said goodbye to Lena before they separated with their families. Before leaving, he told her that he loved her, and then they each ran in different directions. Back in the present, Evan asks the others about Lena's settlement and learns that her colony is approximately 85 miles away. The journey would take around 7 days, and everyone tells him that surviving outside for that long would be nearly impossible. Despite their warnings, Evan decides he has spent enough time hiding. He packs his things and leaves the bunker to search for Lena. Outside, he travels through the remains of the old cities, where broken buildings are scattered across the landscape and vegetation has completely taken over the streets. Giant monsters now roam among the ruins. After walking for several hours, Evan hears something moving nearby and quickly hides inside an abandoned house. When he opens the refrigerator, however, another monster suddenly bursts out with a terrifying roar. Evan panics and runs through the house toward the garden. Before he can get far, a gigantic mutated toad rises from a nearby lake and attacks him with its enormous tongue. Evan manages to dodge the first strike, but he falls beside a dog. Instead of running away, the brave animal immediately begins barking at the massive toad. Evan sees his chance and tries to escape while the creature is distracted. The toad lashes its tongue at him again and catches his leg. Evan crashes to the ground as the monster begins dragging him toward its enormous mouth. Just when all hope seems lost, the dog charges forward and bites the toad's tongue, forcing the creature to release Evan. Evan immediately starts running after the dog, which leads him toward an old bus. The dog pulls on a rope and closes the bus door, proving that it has clearly been trained by someone. As the giant toad eventually moves away in search of them, Evan looks around the bus and realizes that the dog once lived there with its owner. Judging by the belongings scattered around, the owner most likely died during the apocalypse. Evan discovers that the dog's name is Max, and the animal keeps its former owner's leash nearby because it still misses him. Evan spends the night inside the bus, and the next morning Max decides to continue the journey with him. Before leaving, the dog even carries some of its owner's old clothes, which Evan carefully places inside his backpack. Together, they travel through ruined cities and forests that have become completely overgrown. Along the way, Evan and Max grow closer, playing together whenever they find a safe place to stop. Max isn't very good at catching objects, but he has an impressive ability to recognize which fruits are poisonous and prevents Evan from eating them. After traveling for some time, Evan accidentally falls into a deep hole in the ground. When he lands, he notices bones scattered beneath his feet and immediately realizes that he has fallen into a monster's nest. He hears creatures crawling through the underground tunnels and barely manages to dodge one of their attacks. Evan has no idea how he could possibly fight them from inside the hole. Fortunately, a rope suddenly drops down from above. Two survivors, Derek and Nina, have discovered him and pull him out just as several worm-like monsters begin emerging from the opening. When one of the creatures leaps out, Derek kills it with a katana. The pair then throw a grenade into the hole, destroying the remaining monsters underground. Nina instantly becomes attached to Max and is delighted by how friendly the dog is. After realizing that Evan can be trusted, Derek and Nina invite him to travel with them. The four of them continue their journey together. Nina begins teaching Evan how to properly use his crossbow, while she and Derek teach him essential survival skills. They explain that they are heading toward the mountains because the extremely cold temperatures there make it difficult for most monsters to survive. Their journey is suddenly interrupted when they encounter a gigantic snail. Derek takes Evan's shirt and carefully places it inside the snail's shell. Since the snail is peaceful and will continue wandering through the area, its shell will carry Evan's scent away from them, hopefully causing nearby monsters to follow the snail instead. Derek and Nina also explain that Evan can often determine whether a monster is dangerous or friendly by studying its eyes. That night, Derek shares more information about the creatures, giving Evan several important details to add to his survival diary. Over the following days, the group continues moving together. Evan becomes increasingly skilled with his crossbow and grows more confident when facing danger. He also learns more about the behavior of different monsters and the rules of surviving in the wild, carefully writing every new discovery into his diary. Eventually, they reach a point where the four must separate because each person needs to travel toward a different destination. Derek says goodbye to Evan and gives him a grenade before going his own way. Evan and Max continue traveling alone. Eventually, they reach a large swamp, but Max refuses to cross the water. Instead, the dog runs over and hides beneath a giant duck-shaped toy. Evan hears a strange sound and suddenly a massive centipede bursts from beneath the ground. Evan immediately grabs his crossbow, but the creature strikes him and knocks him to the ground. The enormous monster begins circling the duck-shaped object where Max is hiding. Watching the creature approach, Max reminds Evan of the terrible day when everything was taken from him. His family's car had crashed, leaving his parents trapped inside. They desperately told Evan to run, but he couldn't leave them behind. He was forced to watch as a monster attacked and killed his parents before other survivors eventually found and rescued him. In the present, the centipede pushes the duck-shaped toy aside and finally discovers Max. Evan refuses to watch another person or another companion die in front of him. Summoning all his courage, he raises his crossbow and fires. The arrow strikes the centipede directly in the head, killing the enormous creature. Not long afterward, heavy rain begins falling, forcing Evan and Max to search for shelter. They enter an abandoned building and discover Rhea, an old robot that has only 51 minutes of power remaining. Rhea activates her GPS system and shows Evan their exact location. To Evan's surprise, he discovers that Lena's colony is only 10 miles away. Before the monsters appeared, robots had only recently become common, and Evan had never actually spoken to one before. Rhea uses her radio to help Evan contact Lena, who is safe and doing well. Lena explains that several survivors have recently arrived and are planning to rescue everyone from the colony. Before she can explain the details, however, the communication suddenly ends because Rhea's battery is almost completely drained. During her final minutes of power, Rhea shows Evan photographs and videos of the family she once belonged to. Evan embraces the robot, and the two spend their remaining time together watching glowing jellyfish drift through the water. When Rhea finally shuts down, Evan gives her a proper burial before continuing his journey. The following morning, Evan and Max resume their journey, but they suddenly fall into a massive hole. Max quickly runs away when Evan notices a terrifying queen dune eater rising from beneath the ground. Evan throws a toy in another direction to distract the creature, then grabs Max and runs. Unfortunately, the queen follows them through the forest. After sprinting for some distance, Evan catches his foot on a branch and tumbles down a hill beside a river. During the fall, the clothes belonging to Max's former owner slip from Evan's backpack and land in the water. Evan and Max hide behind a hollow log while the enormous queen slowly approaches their location. They remain completely silent, hoping the creature will eventually leave. After waiting for some time, the queen finally moves away. However, Max notices his owner's clothes floating in the river and immediately jumps into the water to retrieve them. His actions attract the monster's attention once again. As the queen moves closer, Evan pulls the grenade Derek gave him from his backpack. He throws it directly into the creature's mouth and immediately jumps into the river himself. Moments later, the monster explodes, leaving both Evan and Max unharmed. Evan eventually reaches the opposite shore, only to discover that his entire body is covered with leeches. He frantically pulls them off while yelling at Max, blaming the dog for attracting the monster. Hurt by Evan's anger, Max runs away. Evan decides to continue alone, but after some time, the venom from the leeches begins affecting him, causing disturbing hallucinations. During one of them, he notices a particular plant that Derek had previously mentioned as an antidote. Remembering the survival lesson, Evan eats the plant. Later, Evan sees several people approaching him. At first, he assumes they are another hallucination, but then he realizes they are real. It is Lena and several members of her colony, and Max has apparently brought them to Evan. Overcome with emotion, Evan rushes toward Lena and kisses her before collapsing unconscious. When Evan wakes up, he finds himself inside Lena's bunker and feels much better. But then he discovers an embarrassing truth. In his confused state, he had actually kissed another survivor instead of Lena. Lena explains that her colony was recently discovered by a yacht captain who promised to transport everyone to a safer location. The survivors are already busy packing their belongings and preparing to leave, so Lena doesn't have much time to spend with Evan. Evan looks around the bunker and observes the colony's way of life, including how everyone is preparing for their relocation near the beach. Soon he meets the people from the yacht: Victor, Mason, and Captain Hale. Later, Evan finally gets a private moment with Lena and learns something heartbreaking. Lena had moved on years earlier because she believed Evan was never coming back. She had eventually started a relationship with another survivor, but that man sadly died the previous year. Evan attempts to contact his original colony, but receives no response. While examining the map they gave him, he discovers several supportive messages that he had never noticed before. Seeing them makes him feel guilty for abandoning the people who had depended on him. Just then, his radio finally connects with his colony. Everyone is thrilled to hear that Evan is alive. They explain that the colony has survived several monster invasions, but before they can provide more information, the connection suddenly disappears. Evan decides that he must return to his family and abandons his plan to leave with the yacht. As he prepares to go, he notices something strange about the food given to him by the yacht crew. Some of the fruits are poisonous, making him realize that the crew may be hiding something. Evan immediately runs toward Lena, who is drinking with several other survivors thanks to Captain Hale's homemade beer. Before Evan can warn anyone, Mason suddenly attacks him, knocking him unconscious. The next morning, Evan wakes up tied to a barrel alongside Lena and several other survivors who were captured while they were drunk. After Mason destroys the colony's radio tower, Captain Hale reveals the truth. He and his crew have been stealing supplies from different colonies, using a gigantic crab as their transportation and weapon. Hale controls the creature through powerful electrical impulses. At that moment, the enormous crab appears, causing everyone to scatter and hide. Lena uses the barrel lid to free herself and Evan. She immediately runs toward Mason, who fires his weapon at her. Lena blocks the bullets using the barrel lid and manages to knock him unconscious. Meanwhile, Evan discovers a trident and uses it to trip the massive crab. The creature crashes onto its back but remains alive. Captain Hale uses his electrical device to shock the crab, causing it to become furious and attack Evan. At the same time, Lena recovers and begins fighting Mason, who has the advantage because of his combat experience. The crab eventually gets back onto its feet and begins destroying the colony. Max courageously runs toward the monster, barking loudly to distract it. Mason tries to shoot Max, but Lena strikes his arm at the last second, causing the bullet to hit the crab instead. Using the confusion, Lena manages to overpower Mason. However, Captain Hale suddenly attacks Lena and knocks her down before ordering his crew to return to the yacht. Meanwhile, the enraged crab continues destroying everything around it. Max rushes toward Lena and begins licking her face until she wakes up. Captain Hale continues shocking the crab, making the creature even more aggressive. The monster eventually focuses on Evan. As it approaches him, Evan notices a weakness inside its mouth. But before he can act, the creature catches him. Lena arrives carrying Mason's weapon and throws it to Evan. He prepares to shoot the crab, but when he looks directly into its eyes, he realizes something important. The creature isn't naturally violent. It is actually a peaceful animal being controlled by the real monster, Captain Hale. Evan changes his plan and fires at the chains controlling the crab instead. The restraints break and the creature immediately releases Evan. The giant crab then escapes into the water and turns its attention toward the yacht. It attacks the vessel, destroying it and killing Mason, Rocco, and Captain Hale in the process. Once everything is finally over, Evan says goodbye to Lena with a long hug. Before leaving, he gives her his diary so she can learn everything he discovered about the monsters and use his knowledge to protect the colony. Although Evan and Lena don't end up together, Evan is thankful for everything that happened because the journey transformed him into a stronger and more capable person. Before they part ways, the two share one final kiss. For the next 7 days, Evan and Max continue traveling together, relying on everything Evan has learned throughout his journey. Eventually, they reach Evan's original colony, where everyone welcomes them with enormous relief and happiness. Evan then uses the radio to contact other surviving bunkers and teaches them the survival techniques he has learned outside. He also tells them about the mountains, where the freezing temperatures keep most monsters away. Evan, Max, and their companions then begin traveling toward the mountains, hoping to reunite with Derek and Nina. Soon, other surviving colonies follow their example, leaving their isolated shelters behind and preparing to build a new life together. If you enjoyed this movie recap, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting movie recaps.